Okay, so we're at the install site, and as you can see, it's a very old doorbell, so it needed to go out anyway. And as we step back here, you can see that there's shrubbery here. So there's definitely a good idea to put in a 15-degree wedge or a 30-degree wedge. We're going to look into that, of course, and see which is the better way to do it. We'll probably need to use a blade to get all the paint that's been painted over, or maybe even stucco. But first things first. Okay, so you want to make sure you turn off your breaker, which we already did. We located the breaker for the doorbell, and obviously the way to do it is hit the breaker that's labeled that you think is the one. In this case, it was the kitchen and living room lighting. This is for a one-bedroom apartment, so we hit this breaker, and then someone went outside and rang the doorbell. It didn't ring. We flipped it back on. They rang the doorbell. It rang. Flipped it back off again. Rang the doorbell. It did not ring. So you also want to make sure you're practicing safety first, and that you don't touch wires while they're live and perhaps ruin your electrical, cause a fire, or even ruin the doorbell while you're installing it with live wire. So make sure you do this. Okay, so before you start taking the doorbell screws out, you want to take a blade to it if there's paint over it, just like I did here. You can see the line. So you just want to continue doing that all the way around, just to make sure that when you pull it, you don't rip up a bunch of paint. So this is the way the doorbell came out. When I tried taking the screws out, it just broke up into pieces. But one thing you may want to do is take a picture of the way the wires are, because sometimes instead of using one wire, they use two wires for each location, and that's the way you want it to go on your install. So here you'll see that the black and the red are in one connection, and the green and the yellow are in the other. Okay, one thing the Nest app wants you to do when you set up your doorbells, they want you to verify what transformer you have. In this case, here's the Chime, and we don't see the transformer, so it might be inside the wall or might be in the attic, because there's your ceiling up here. But here's some bit of good information. Volts, 10 to 16 volts, so you might want to keep that in mind. But you can also go outside and test your actual voltage on the doorbell. And the way you do that is you get a multimeter like this one, and there's two V's. There's one with a straight line and one with the little curve there. You put it on 200 and you test your voltage. You want to get at least 16 or more outside at the doorbell, not here. Don't put your leads here. This is not going to tell you much. So you want to go outside where the doorbell is, and you want to put these two leads, one on each side of the doorbell, with the doorbell out of the socket, and just find the two areas where the wires go to already connected to the doorbell, and you want to get 16, which we did. Okay, so at the Chime, the wire that was at the front is going to connect to the white wire on this Chime adapter that comes with your Nest. Make sure you do it this way, okay? That's going to be your first step. You're going to remove the wire from the front, in case if it's your situation where you just have a front doorbell, and you're going to connect it to the connector on the white wire. So these connectors, if you push this like this, it releases the wire, but if you push it in, it also allows the wire to go in. So you put the wire in there. That's going to be your first step, okay? Okay, the next step is to get the white wire that comes out of the Chime adapter. Same color white wire, and connect it where your old wire was that you connected here. So it should look like this. Wire that used to be here goes to your white wire, and then white wire goes where your old wire used to be. So it's kind of already creating a loop. If this doesn't sound logical to you, I mean, I don't know what else to say. The next step already looks self-explanatory. You're going to take this wire and put it into the gray connector, and then you're going to take your gray wire and put it here. That's simple. So when you're all done, just tuck your wires in. This little thing here has adhesive when you peel back here. So you'll see that little tab there, just peel it back, and then you can stick it on here. It's up to you. You might not want to cover your lettering here just in case you need it for reference, but either way you could just tuck it back in there and then just put your cover on and you should be fine. Also, you want to make sure they don't interfere with these metal things that are actually what the chime is going to make it ring. So make sure that your wires are not touching either this part here or this part at the top. It is mentioned on the app while you're doing the installation anyway.
So I'm going to show you a series of pictures here so you can get an idea of how the install should be finalized. So as I showed you at the beginning, the wedge is something that you can install particularly when you have visibility issues. And if you recall, I just did a video on it recently where I showed the wedge and how it works. In this situation, we installed a 30-degree wedge, and you really have to pay attention to detail here because you can easily get this wedge installed the other way around. So when you have the wedge in front of you, it's best to put it up against the wall so you can see exactly how your Nest video doorbell is going to look like once you have it installed on the wall. So you want to make sure it's tilted towards the way that you're going to want the most visibility. If you get this little detail wrong, it does the exact opposite. It'll make bad visibility even worse. So make sure you have that installed the right way, and that's why we are using a picture here to show you exactly how it's going to be. So you're going to fish the wires right through the center, and what we did, and we'll cover that in a little bit, we also added a little bit of silicone sealant, clear silicone sealant, because there's a gap between where the actual doorbell went, which is right on the edge of the plate, and between the wedge itself. So we added some silicone so you don't get any water in there when it rains, but make sure you fish the wires through the middle, get your 2 screws in there, and then once you're ready to go, your next step is to put in the back plate of the Nest doorbell. So you're going to get your back plate in there, get your 2 screws onto the wedge. The wedge should already be affixed to the wall. You're going to double check these wires, and there's a reason why at the beginning we took a picture of the existing doorbell so you can get an idea of how exactly it's going to be at the final installation. So if you remember at the beginning of the video, we recommended you take a picture of the wiring, and here's where that's going to be come in handy. You want to remember that picture so that when it's time to put the wires together, you do it exactly like the old doorbell used to be configured. You don't want to get your red with the yellow and then the green with the black. You definitely don't want to do that. So make sure you take a picture of it and use it. Once it's done, you can go ahead and put the doorbell up against the back plate. Make sure you hear a clicking sound. If you do not hear a clicking sound, that means the wires were crimped right at that opening. So you want to pull it out. Make sure you use that tool that came with it and pull it out. But you want to make sure you get a nice, clean, and crisp clicking sound. This is very important, especially when it comes to making sure that the Nest doorbell is actually created a tight seal. So make sure you do this when you're putting the doorbell together. And then last but not least, you want to make sure you have a blue ring. That means that it's working with the appropriate voltage, which is 16 volts. If you get an orange ring, that means you need to put in a new transformer or try different means of voltage.